The silent signal. The drilling platform on Europa shuddered as another geyser erupted nearby, sending pillars of frozen water hundreds of meters into Jupiter's turbulent sky. Captain Sarah Chen steadied herself against the control console, watching her team's progress on the monitors. They had been boring through Europa's ice shell for 6 months, chasing anomalous readings that suggested something metallic lay buried beneath 40 kilometers of ancient ice. "Captain, we've broken through," announced Dr. Marcus Webb, the mission's lead geologist. His voice crackled through the comm system with barely contained excitement. "The drill just hit open space. There's a cavern down there and the metallic signature is off the charts." Sarah's heart raced. The readings had been consistent for weeks, but she had hardly dared to hope they would find anything significant. Europa was supposed to be nothing more than ice and ocean, perhaps harboring simple microbial life in its depths. The presence of refined metal this far beneath the surface defied every model they had. The descent probe launched 30 minutes later, its cameras streaming data back to the surface as it navigated through the breach. The cavern was massive, its walls carved with geometric precision that nature could never achieve. At its center stood a structure that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was a perfect sphere, 20 meters in diameter, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as the probe's light swept across them. "Those aren't natural formations," Webb whispered, stating the obvious. "Someone built this. Someone put it here deliberately." The sphere pulsed with a faint blue light growing stronger as the probe approached. Then, without warning, it activated. A beam of energy shot upward, passing harmlessly through the probe but continuing through the ice above. The drilling platform's sensors went wild as the beam punched through Europa's surface and shot into space, carrying with it a signal that had been waiting beneath the ice for untold millennia. Back on Earth, every deep space monitoring station detected the signal simultaneously. It was complex, layered with information and mathematical patterns that spoke of incredible sophistication. Within hours, the world's best cryptographers and scientists were working to decode its message. What they found changed everything. The signal was a countdown. 300 days until something arrived. But more disturbing was what came after the countdown. Star charts showing the position of every human colony, mining station, and exploration vessel in the galaxy. Whoever had built the beacon knew exactly where humanity had spread, even though many of those colonies had been established only in the last 50 years. Commander Viktor Petrov stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Station Atlas, watching his tactical display light up with contacts. The countdown had reached 290 days when the first visitors arrived. They did not come through the established shipping lanes or use the commercial jump points. Instead, space itself seemed to fold around them as they materialized at the edge of the solar system. The ships were unlike anything in Earth's databases. They moved without visible propulsion, their hulls made of a material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were 3 of them, each one a kilometer long, shaped like twisted helixes that rotated slowly as they approached. "Incoming transmission," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. It's in perfect English, Russian, Mandarin, and 40 other Earth languages simultaneously." The message played through the bridge speakers. The voice was melodious but cold, carrying an undertone that made everyone who heard it uncomfortable. "Species designation, humanity. You have activated a proscribed beacon. Under hegemony law established 50,000 rotations ago, your kind is classified as a contained threat. The quarantine has been breached. Sterilization protocols are now in effect." Petrov felt ice in his veins. "Open a channel," he ordered. When the connection established, he spoke carefully. "This is Commander Petrov of Earth Defense Command. We activated no beacon intentionally. We were conducting scientific research. Surely we can discuss this misunderstanding." The response was immediate. "There is no misunderstanding. Your species was quarantined to this system after the War of Expansion. You were memory wiped and technologically reset as mercy. The beacon was placed to alert us if you ever rediscovered space travel. You have had 800 of your years to spread. This contamination must be cleansed." Before Petrov could respond, something extraordinary happened. Earth itself seemed to wake up. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in places no human had ever explored, ancient machines stirred to life. The planet's magnetic field fluctuated in patterns that spelled out words in the same alien mathematical language the beacon had used. Mountains split open to reveal weapons platforms that had been hidden for millennia. The ocean floors cracked, and from them rose structures that defied understanding. Sarah Chen, still on Europa, watched her instruments in amazement as similar structures activated across the solar system. Mars's polar caps melted instantly, revealing massive defensive installations. The asteroid belt reorganized itself, individual rocks moving with purpose to form a defensive perimeter. Even the sun seemed to respond, its solar flares suddenly directed with surgical precision toward the approaching vessels. "My God," Webb breathed beside her. "The entire solar system is a weapon." The hegemony scouts stopped their approach, clearly not expecting this development. Their next transmission carried a different tone, one of confusion and perhaps fear. "This is not possible." The Guardian protocols were destroyed. Earth was stripped of all defensive systems. That was when the second signal began broadcasting from Earth. This one was not a beacon or a warning. It was a wake-up call. Across the galaxy, on every world humanity had colonized, similar defensive systems activated. Humanity had spread far in 800 years. And apparently they had carried something with them. Something dormant in their very DNA that responded to this signal. On the colony world of New Haven, colonists watched in awe as their cities transformed. Buildings revealed hidden weapon emplacements. The peaceful agrobots in their fields reconfigured themselves into combat units. Children playing in parks found their playground equipment morphing into defensive barriers. It was as if every piece of human technology had been waiting for this moment. The transformation was not violent or chaotic. It was precise, organized, as if following a plan that had been written into the very fabric of human civilization. Even the colonists themselves felt it, a stirring in their minds, memories that were not quite memories, knowledge they had never learned suddenly accessible. Dr. Chen received an encrypted message directly to her neural implant, something that should have been impossible with her standard civilian hardware. The message was simple but profound. Guardian Protocol Gamma activated. Human Consciousness Network online. Prepare for integration. She felt it then. A connection to every other human in the solar system. Not telepathy exactly, but an awareness, a shared purpose that transcended individual thought. Humanity was remembering something it had been forced to forget, and with that remembrance came understanding. The war the hegemony spoke of had not been humanity trying to conquer the galaxy. It had been humanity trying to protect it. The enemy had not been other species, but something far worse, something that had required humanity to transform itself, to become something more than human to fight it. And when that war was won, the other species had feared what humanity had become, so they had done the only thing they could think of. They had made humanity forget. But they had not understood that what humanity had become was not just technological or biological. It was quantum, woven into the very fabric of space-time around Earth and carried in quantum entanglement to every world humans would ever touch. The quarantine had not contained humanity. It had given them time to spread their protective network across the galaxy, without anyone realizing it. The hegemony scouts began to retreat, but it was too late. The countdown was not for their arrival. It was for humanity's awakening. And as the defensive systems of 100 human worlds came online simultaneously, as human minds across the galaxy connected into a vast network of shared consciousness and purpose, the truth became clear. Humanity had never been the threat. They had been the galaxy's immune system. And now that system was activating to face a danger that the hegemony had forgotten existed. The real enemy was coming, and humanity was remembering why they had chosen to forget in the first place. When stars remember, the hegemony's main fleet arrived exactly when the countdown reached 0, just as Earth's transformed defense systems achieved full integration. Admiral Krathvor of the hegemony stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Inevitable Truth, watching the tactical display with growing unease. He had commanded fleets for 3,000 years, had overseen the containment of 17 species deemed too dangerous for galactic civilization. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he was seeing. Earth's solar system had become something impossible. The planets moved in their orbits, but between them stretched filaments of energy that looked almost organic, like neurons in a vast brain. Space itself seemed alive, pulsing with patterns that hurt to observe directly. His fleet of 10,000 vessels, the largest armada ever assembled by the hegemony, suddenly seemed insignificant. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, her voice trembling, We're detecting quantum fluctuations across the entire system. It's as if reality itself has been weaponized. Before Krathvor could respond, space around his fleet began to change. Stars that should have been light years away suddenly appeared closer, their light bending in impossible ways. The navigation systems on every ship began displaying errors, showing their position as simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Then the human transmission began. It was not directed at the hegemony fleet but broadcast across the entire galaxy, carried on quantum channels that bypassed normal space entirely. The voice was neither male nor female but somehow unmistakably human. To all sentient species of the galaxy, it began. This is the Terran collective consciousness. We are humanity and we remember. 50,000 years ago you asked us to forget what we had become, to return to ignorance for your peace of mind. We agreed. Not because we were defeated, but because we loved you. We chose amnesia over annihilation, chains over conquest. But the universe has not forgotten why we transformed ourselves, and neither have the shadows between the stars. Sarah Chen, still on Europa but now connected to the vast network of human consciousness, understood everything in an instant. The knowledge flowed through her like water through a suddenly opened dam. Humanity had discovered something in their early space exploration, something that existed in the dark matter between galaxies. It was a form of life, or perhaps anti-life, that fed on consciousness itself. The more a species grew, the more they thought and dreamed and reached for the stars, the more attractive they became to these entities. Humanity had been the first to recognize the threat. They had tried to warn the other species, but fear and distrust had prevented cooperation. So humanity had done the only thing they could. They had transformed themselves into something that could fight these dark matter predators. They had become a hybrid of organic consciousness and quantum technology, spreading themselves across space-time itself. The war had been terrible. Humanity had won, driving the entities back into the void between galaxies. But the cost had been the fear of every other species. Humanity had become something beyond their understanding, something that could manipulate reality itself. The hegemony, newly formed from the traumatized survivors of that war, had demanded humanity's surrender. And humanity, exhausted and heartbroken by the fear in the eyes of those they had saved, had agreed. They had allowed their memories to be suppressed, their technology to be hidden, their true nature to be forgotten. They had returned to Earth to sleep, to dream, to forget. But they had also prepared, knowing that one day the entities would return, and the galaxy would need its guardians again. Now that day had come. Across the galaxy, astronomical instruments detected something that should not exist. The void between galaxies, supposedly empty space, was moving. Dark matter was coalescing into forms that violated every law of physics. The entities had spent 50,000 years recovering, evolving, preparing for their return. And they had timed it perfectly, arriving just as the hegemony moved to destroy the only force that could stop them. Admiral Krathvor's fleet sensors screamed warnings as space behind them began to tear. Through the rifts came things that had no true form, shadows that existed in dimensions the mind could not process. His weapons fired automatically, but energy beams and projectiles passed through the entities without effect. They were not truly physical, existing in a state between matter and thought. Then humanity acted. Every human in the galaxy, from Earth to the furthest colony, joined their consciousness to the quantum network. Their bodies remained where they were, but their minds merged into something greater. The defensive systems were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were anchors for human consciousness to interact with space-time directly. Sarah felt herself expand beyond her physical form. She was simultaneously on Europa and everywhere else, part of a vast intelligence that spanned light years. Through this collective consciousness, humanity reached out and grasped the fabric of reality itself. Where the dark matter entities tried to intrude into normal space, humanity was there, reinforcing the barriers between dimensions. The battle was not fought with ships and weapons, but with will and thought. Humanity had learned in that terrible war 50,000 years ago that consciousness itself was the ultimate force in the universe. Matter and energy were just expressions of consciousness interacting with quantum fields, and humanity had become masters of that interaction. The hegemony fleet watched in awe as space around them became a battlefield beyond comprehension. Humanity fought the entities not by destroying them, but by denying them access to reality. Every attempt by the shadows to manifest was met by human will, reshaping space-time to exclude them. Stars were moved to create barriers of gravity. Planets were quantum entangled to form defensive networks. Even time itself was manipulated, creating loops and paradoxes that trapped the entities in conceptual prisons. But the entities had evolved too. They had learned from their last defeat. They began to attack not through space but through consciousness itself, trying to corrupt and consume human thoughts. This was what they had always feared most about humanity, not their technology or their weapons, but their ability to unite their consciousness into something greater than the sum of its parts. The collective human consciousness shuddered under the assault. Individual minds felt the touch of the void, the whisper of entropy trying to unmake their thoughts. But humanity had prepared for this too. The 800 years of spreading across the galaxy had not just been expansion. It had been practice. Every colony established, every connection made between worlds had strengthened the network. And now humanity revealed their greatest secret. The transformation 50,000 years ago had not just been about fighting the entities. It had been about becoming something that could not be destroyed by them. Humanity had woven their consciousness into the quantum foundation of the universe itself. They had become part of the cosmic operating system, as essential to reality as gravity or electromagnetism. The entities realized too late that they were not fighting a species anymore. They were fighting the universe's immune response, and that response had been growing stronger for 50,000 years. Every human born, every human thought and dream had added to the collective strength. Humanity had become what they had always been meant to be, the guardians of consciousness itself. The final phase of the battle was not violent. It was almost gentle. Humanity did not destroy the entities. They transformed them. Using the same quantum consciousness techniques that had elevated humanity, they offered the shadows a choice: evolution or exile. Some entities accepted, allowing themselves to be reformed into beings that could exist in harmony with conscious life. Others fled back to the void, pursued by human consciousness, ensuring they could never return. As the battle ended, Admiral Krathvor found his ship receiving a direct transmission from Earth. The image that appeared on his screen was Sarah Chen, but her eyes held depths that spoke of connection to something vast. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in his mind. "The war is over. The entities are contained or converted. But we need to talk about the future." The hegemony had a choice to make. They could accept humanity as they truly were, quantum consciousness guardians of the galaxy, or they could continue to fear them. But now they had seen what lurked in the void, what humanity had been protecting them from all along. "We never wanted to rule," Sarah continued, speaking for all humanity. "We only wanted to protect." The transformation was never about power. It was about responsibility. We became what the galaxy needed us to be, and we're prepared to do it again as many times as necessary. The aftermath was not simple. The galaxy had to adjust to the reality that humanity was no longer just a species, but a fundamental force of protection woven into space-time itself. Some species embraced this, grateful for the guardians they had nearly destroyed. Others remained fearful, unable to accept what humanity had become. But humanity was patient. They had waited 50,000 years. They could wait longer. They maintained their physical forms, living their lives on their worlds, but always connected to the greater consciousness that watched over the galaxy. Children were born who grew up knowing they were part of something greater, that their thoughts and dreams contributed to the shield that kept the darkness at bay. The beacon on Europa was transformed into a monument, a reminder of the day humanity woke up, and the galaxy learned that sometimes forgetting is not the same as being gone. The defensive systems remained active but hidden, ready for the next threat that would inevitably come. Because humanity had learned the ultimate truth, consciousness was not just a product of the universe. It was what gave the universe meaning, and they would guard that meaning until the last star burned out and the last thought faded into darkness. The galaxy still counted the dead from that day, but now they counted them as heroes who had awakened to save everyone. And in the quantum consciousness that humanity had become, those dead were not truly gone. They lived on in the collective, their thoughts and memories part of the eternal guardian that humanity had chosen to be. Earth's gate had been opened, but it had not brought destruction. It had brought remembrance, and with remembrance came the promise that never again would the galaxy face the darkness alone.